Taiwan now faces a moment of deep uncertainty. Its leaders once stood shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine when it was invaded. They celebrated a shared bond of democratic values. They even warned of threats from looming authoritarian giants like Russia and China. Today, Taiwan is forced to rethink its alliances. American policy appears to waver towards Ukraine and, as a consequence, towards Taiwan.
Not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III.
The new tone from President Donald Trump on Ukraine has many in Taiwan asking some hard questions. Can Taiwan truly count on American support if China acts aggressively against it? Taiwan and Ukraine once shared more than just these common values. They are both beacons and examples of democracy. They have faced pressure from powerful, non-democratic neighbors like China and Russia. When Russia invaded Ukraine, Taiwan's leaders quickly voiced solidarity with Kiev. They saw the Ukrainian struggle as their own. Taiwan's fate, they argued, is intertwined with that of Ukraine. In every public statement that was made by the previous president and the current president in Taiwan, their belief is very clear that they have to share the common cause with Ukraine. These shared ideals built trust with the United States and with both its European and Asian partners. The island of Taiwan became a symbol of democratic resistance against the hegemon of China. The story of Taiwan is one of constant vigilance. For decades, the island has prepared for a possible invasion by China. Every single day, fighter jets and warships from China test Taiwan's defenses. Each show of military might by China sends a ripple of anxiety through the island. Taiwan's leaders believe that strong ties with the United States are essential. They see Washington as a shield against the external threat that is China. In their view, American support has always been the key to survival. But the political landscape in Washington has been shifting. President Trump has been making headlines recently for his rather hard-edged comments on Ukraine. He has tried directly to cut a deal with Russia. He has made clear that Ukraine may or may not be part of the negotiations and that he wants to quickly put an end to the war, even if that means losing territory, even if that means no NATO membership and no security guarantees for Ukraine. He's questioned long-standing US commitments both in Europe and in Asia. For many in Taiwan, these remarks are deeply troubling. They worry that if Trump is willing to sideline and throw Ukraine under the bus, he might do the same with Taiwan. Such a move would leave the island dangerously exposed. American policy towards Ukraine was once a symbol of transatlantic unity. It spoke of common interests and shared values. Now, some people are sensing a transactional tone in the Trump White House. The United States may appear ready to negotiate with adversaries like China and Russia, and this, Taiwan fears, is that America will make deals with Russia over Ukraine, and that could mean that it could abandon other allies as well. Many Taiwanese citizens have taken to social media and expressed their anxiety over Trump's comments. Some even suggest that if war with China were to break out, the same transactional approach might be used by Trump. This potential shift in policy stokes deep skepticism. The idea that America might try to bargain with autocrats without giving democracies a full seat at the table, that is what worries Taiwan, and that is what worries Ukraine. It raises questions about the reliability of American promises. Taiwan's foreign policy has always leaned on the backing of the United States. For nearly a decade, closer ties with Washington have been a cornerstone of Taiwan's defense strategy. Leaders in Taipei have relied on American military aid and political support. They have cultivated the relationship with the United States. This partnership has been vital for Taiwan's security. Taiwan, in fact, sees America as the guarantor of its security. China remains a constant and immediate threat to Taiwan every single day. The Chinese government claims Taiwan as its own. It's in fact one of the long-standing, unfinished agendas as per the Communist Party of China. It shows its power almost on a weekly basis by sending fighter jets and warships. These military maneuvers are a clear warning to Taiwan. They remind Taiwan and ordinary Taiwanese that war is just some time away. The island's security depends on deterring China's aggression. For Taiwan, American support is more than just a promise, it's a matter of survival. Every move by China is closely watched. Like I said, every week, if not every day, there is some display of military might. It's means of intimidation and also a means of testing how much Taiwan will push back. It's a probe against Taiwan's defenses. The constant pressure is designed to erode Taiwan's resolve, and yet Taiwan has built its defense strategy on the assumption that America will back it. There's even a military treaty that underwrites this security guarantee between Washington and Taipei. That assumption now faces serious challenges. With President Trump's remarks raising doubts about American reliability, Taiwan finds itself in a perilous situation. The challenge from China is not limited to just military posturing. Taiwan now faces other forms of aggression. Recently, a cargo ship that was crewed by Chinese nationals was detained by the Taiwanese authorities. They suspect the ship severed an undersea communications cable. That cable linked Taiwan to the Penghu Islands. These islands are just about 30 miles south of the main island of Taiwan. The incident is part of a series of mysterious events. There are growing suspicions that China and even Russia may be experimenting with cable sabotage. They are cutting undersea cables and thereby disrupting communications. Taiwan relies on these cables for its internet and global connectivity. A damaged cable can cripple commerce and emergency services. Similar incidents have happened before as well. 2 years ago, a cable between Taiwan and Matsu Island was cut. Just earlier this year, another digital cable was damaged. Taiwanese officials say that a Chinese ship may have deliberately dragged its anchor across the cable. These acts of sabotage are a clear message to Taipei. They demonstrate Chinese aggression can come in many forms, so Taiwan must now defend itself not against just military territory but also its communications networks. The incidents raise serious stakes of an already volatile situation. They add to the anxiety amongst Taiwanese citizens. Each new event deepens the sense that Taiwan is under siege from multiple angles. Taiwan is not standing still. Its leaders have taken steps to strengthen their defense. President William Lai has been proactive. He's promised to increase military spending. Taiwan will now spend at least 3% of its GDP on defense. That's a significant jump from the previous 2.45% of GDP. It sends out a strong signal that Taiwan is determined to bolster its own defense. In parallel, the island hosts more semiconductor fabrication plants than any other place on the planet. These fabs are critical to global tech supply chain. The US has demanded that more such plants be built on American soil. Taiwan is preparing proposals to meet that request. Balancing economic interests with national security is not a small task, but Taiwan has no choice but to do both. It currently stands at a critical crossroads. Its shared values with Ukraine, which were once bound tightly to the American dream, now shifts in American policy under new President Trump have sown seeds of doubt. Taiwan faces an ever-present danger from China. The risks are high. Short-term actions like increased military spending may help, but long-term stability requires unwavering and strong alliances. The coming months will test Taiwan's resolve. Its leaders must balance hope and caution. They must prepare for every eventuality. In fact, the future of Taiwan as an independent nation may well depend on this balancing act. All right, so what is the view both in Taipei as well as in Beijing, both on the tariffs and more importantly, what is happening in Ukraine? Is there a sense that America has seemingly thrown Ukraine under the bus? It's forcing it to get into a peace deal with Russia, with or without the Ukrainians in that room? And may the same thing happen if China were to forcibly try and annex Taiwan? But we'll get to all of that in a second with Jonathan Cheng. He is the Beijing Bureau Chief of the Wall Street Journal. Thank you very much, Jonathan, for speaking with us here on CNN News 18. First, I wanted to get your thoughts on this whole tariff business. What's the view in the first 50 days of Donald Trump on tariffs? He's put tariffs on China. China has put retaliatory tariffs as well. What's the view in Beijing as to how they are going to navigate around this tariff business by Trump? Not just, the fact that it's counterproductive to free trade, but more importantly, China and the United States are the two biggest trading partners in the world, two biggest trading nations in the world.
Well, I think like the rest of the world, I think people in Beijing, the leaders here are trying to figure out, where this is coming from, where this is going, and whether or not this pace is going to keep up. If this pace keeps up for the next 4 years, then I think we're all in for quite a ride. Certainly, the tariffs were not unexpected. China, of course, knows the Trump tariff playbook very well from the first term. I don't think they're particularly happy about it, but I don't know that that is outside of their realm of expectation. I think it is interesting to see what Donald Trump is doing when it comes to the geopolitics of it. And I think even though China has been a large focus of Trump and his rhetoric over the years, I think right now they're still trying to figure out precisely what Trump's strategy is towards China.
I want to talk about geopolitics and, of course, the big overarching news development. The theme seems to be the ceasefire deal in Ukraine. Of course, we all saw the bust-up that happened at the Oval Office a couple of weeks ago where Trump and Vance sort of ganged up against Zelensky. How is this, this whole rushing through this peace deal in Ukraine, mostly on Russia's terms, not so much on Ukraine's terms? How is this being viewed both in Beijing as well as in Taipei on either side of the Taiwan Straits?
Sure. I mean, I'm in Beijing. We do talk to people in Taiwan, but I can definitely speak for Beijing in this respect, which is obviously China has been quite close to Vladimir Putin, to the Russians. And so if you're going to have an occupant in the White House who is going to be closer to the Russian position, that's obviously good news from the Chinese perspective. Of course, I think it remains to be seen how he might apply that template to China. I mean, there has been talk in Washington that you need to quickly wrap up Ukraine, Russia, so that you can then turn your focus to dealing with China. If that's what's going on here, then obviously that won't be so welcome in Beijing. But if you see what's happened with Russia and Ukraine as perhaps a template for what he may want to do vis-a-vis Taiwan, then yes, I would be quite optimistic perhaps, or at least sense some opportunity if I'm Beijing. And on the other side, I might be quite worried if I were sitting in Taiwan and wondering whether or not the U.S. support for Taiwan is going to remain.
Of course, the Taiwan issue is a big, almost emotive political issue in Beijing. It's really high up the pecking order for Xi Jinping. I think he's even said in the past on multiple occasions, if it came down to that, even militarily annexing Taiwan is very much on the cards. The Chinese people and the Chinese military should go on and do it. That's what he has said. He's really sort of drummed up the rhetoric around, forcibly annexing Taiwan. So I'm just curious to know what the feeling there is by looking at the events that have played out between Ukraine and Russia and the Americans pressurizing Ukraine to accept a peace deal. Is there a feeling in the corridors of power in Beijing that this is a window of opportunity? This is a brief amount of time that's available, if you will, where Xi Jinping and the PLA, if they were to make that decision to forcibly annex Taiwan, then this might be the best window of opportunity. What's the thinking in the corridors of power?
Well, first of all, it's very hard to know what they are thinking and how they see the situation here. Certainly what you've described there is one possible interpretation, and I think there's a logic to it. I think you do also need to weigh that, however, against the sense in Beijing here that the military itself in China is not, it's in a little bit of turmoil right now, in the sense that Xi Jinping has gone through several senior leaders at the top of the People's Liberation Army. There have been ongoing purges. There have been a lot of corruption investigations and so on. So you have to factor that in as well, that this may not be a good time for the PLA to embark on what would be quite a sophisticated and difficult maneuver. This is an amphibious sort of a situation. Taiwan has a lot of natural geographic advantages on its side. So do you really want to be doing that at a time when your own military, you may not trust it, or there may not be that sense of stability within the military? So you have that, and of course keep in mind as well that China hasn't fought a conflict since 1979, so that's quite a long time, and that is, it all needs to be factored in. It isn't just going to be what is happening in the U.S.
And one final word, just taking forward that whole analogy about China and Taiwan vis-a-vis what's happening in Russia and Ukraine. I'm just curious to know, in Taiwan, for example, Taiwan is not Ukraine. It has more bargaining chips, if you will, one of which, of course, the biggest insurance policies, perhaps, having this huge semiconductor network, led, of course, by TSMC. Is that insurance enough that if it came down to that, if China were to militarily attack Taiwan, then the world community, the United States included, there would be enough of an incentive for them to try and deter that kind of action simply because the world runs on semiconductors?
Yeah, I think, that's a complicated question in part because TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing, the crown jewel of Taiwan's semiconductor industry, has just pledged that they're going to build more, expand their facilities in the US, including some of the most advanced chips. So that changes the equation a little bit. And ultimately, it's hard to know because, if China were to attack, it wouldn't want to destroy those facilities either. They would probably want to assume control of them. The U.S. Has had senior officials, advisors, muse publicly about the idea of destroying those facilities in Taiwan should there be a Chinese attack. So, it is it's an issue that can be quite complex, and of course you layer that on top of all the other complexities of just the politics and the military, and it's hard to single out any one factor here. But I think if you're Xi Jinping, this is a almost sacred task that he has set out, that the Communist Party has set out for decades now. I think he wants to see it done on his timeline, whatever that may be. So I do think that will factor in, but it will be one factor among many others.
All right, Jonathan Cheng, Beijing Bureau Chief of the Wall Street Journal, thank you very much for joining us here on CNN News 18. Thank you.